wasn't telling the truth. Today, AstraZeneca has said there is no agreement.
Victoria records its lowest daily increase of coronavirus cases in more than 5 weeks. The Disability Royal Commission told essential items were stolen from people's mobility devices during the height of panic buying. And the Democrats formally nominate Joe Biden as their 2020 presidential candidate. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Kirsten Aiken. The Prime Minister says Australia will be aiming for a 95% vaccination rate once a COVID-19 vaccine is found. Australia has signed a deal to manufacture doses of a potential vaccine currently being developed by Oxford University. But the federal opposition argues the government is jumping the gun in celebrating an agreement. Political reporter Matthew Doran joins us now from Parliament House in Canberra. Good afternoon to you, Matthew. What is the arrangement the government has struck?
Well, the Prime Minister says that Australia has this agreement with UK-based drug company AstraZeneca to produce the vaccine, if indeed it is found to be a successful vaccine and one that can go into mass usage, that's currently being developed by Oxford University, also in the UK. It's the vaccine that seems to be holding the most promise in this global discussion about the best way to tackle coronavirus and ensure that people can be immunised from its potentially deadly effects. But the situation here is that this virus, or this vaccine rather, it's still under development, and the discussion is, well, if Australia has entered into an agreement here to produce it in Australia, how is that going to happen? Where is it going to be manufactured and under what circumstances? The government is saying that the likely manufacturer here in Australia is CSL. They have some facilities around the country, but primarily in Victoria. And the Prime Minister is saying that this could be the best hope to ensure that the Australian public is protected from coronavirus going into the future.
Today is a day of hope. And Australia needs hope, the world needs hope when it comes to this coronavirus. And should we be in a position for the trials to be successful, we would hope that this would be made available early next year. If it can be done sooner than that, great.
That's the Prime Minister speaking in Sydney earlier today. Now, the issue here is what's an agreement and what's an agreement to agree in the future. The Labor Party has seized upon this announcement today and said that this is not an agreement to manufacture and distribute the vaccine across the country, if indeed the Oxford University vaccine is the successful candidate here. This is just a letter of intent. So the government has said that it will enter into an agreement in the future should that vaccine become readily available or be proven to have the desired effect. The Shadow Health Minister, Chris Bowen, said that today's announcement from the government was more about advertising than it was about substance.
So this is a Prime Minister who has completely jumped the gun on his announcement, but he hasn't jumped the gun on the substance. The government is way behind on the substance.
Now, Matthew, if this vaccine is successful and everything goes to plan, how will it be delivered around the country?
Well, we're talking about 25 million doses of this vaccine, and it is a two-stage vaccine, so Australians would have to get 2 doses of it for it to be effective, if indeed it does get through this trial process. It appears that there will be, while it will be free for everyone across the country, there will be a staged process to this, with the Prime Minister saying, and health authorities saying, that frontline health workers would be among the first to receive the vaccine, along with people considered to be vulnerable to coronavirus, so those with pre-existing conditions that have already weakened their immune system and would therefore be at a higher risk of picking up COVID-19 in the community. The Acting Chief Medical Officer, Paul Kelly, said that there will be and is already work underway to develop a plan to ensure that this could be rolled out across the country when it is finally developed.
There'll be very strong campaigns to encourage people, and we've had experience before of linking vaccination with other programs, and all of those things will be looked at over time.
Now, part of this deal today is also looking at that distribution issue as well, with some discussion about agreements to go as far as organising the needles and the syringes that will be sent around the country to ensure the vaccine can be delivered. But of course, this is all something of a hypothetical at this stage, because there is still this long way to go in the testing of the Oxford University vaccine to decide whether or not it is the best candidate to try to immunise the Australian population and the global population. Something else the Prime Minister has mentioned today, though, is that if Australia is in this position where it's manufacturing the vaccine under licence, it would do so not only for Australia, but potentially other parts of this region as well. And a lot of the discussion is about whether Australia could be used as a hub, I guess you could say, for manufacturing this vaccine to take it into areas in the Pacific in particular. Kirsten?
All right, thank you, Matthew Doran, our political reporter in Canberra. Let's get more on this now with medical reporter Sophie Scott. Hello to you, Sophie. There is a lot of optimism about this vaccine candidate. If indeed it is proven, how do you believe it is expected to work?
Well, you're right. There is a lot of optimism about this particular vaccine. There are about 150 vaccines in development, but this is probably in one of the top 3 candidates. This vaccine works, it uses a version of the common cold virus that infects monkeys, but it doesn't make humans sick. And when the virus enters the cells, it releases the spike protein, and that then boosts the person's immunity against getting coronavirus. So there have been some studies on this using monkeys, and they've found that it boosted the immunity and protected them against getting the virus. And also in humans as well, they've done some studies to show that it can work to boost the immunity against the virus. But it's still pretty early days. It's still in a phase 3 clinical trial. And so until that's complete, we won't really know how safe and effective it is. And so it is all, while it's hopeful, it's still a way off until it would be something that we could use, even though the UK is saying that it could potentially be rolled out at the end of this year. And the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, was saying next year for Australia. But there's still some scientific milestones that would need to be met for that to happen.
If it is proven, how do you expect it will be rolled out and over what time frame?
Well, it's 2 doses, and like Matt said, it would take probably a while for those doses to get manufactured in Australia to make sure we have the capabilities to do it here. It's going to be something that everyone in the world is going to want to get their hands on. So it'll be really up to all the countries to make sure they have the capabilities to do it. As we heard, it would be probably healthcare workers, aged care workers, and older people particularly that would get the vaccine first, because they're the most vulnerable. And when you look at what happens to older people who get this virus, they're the ones who get sick and they're the ones who are dying from it. So I'm sure they would be prioritised, definitely. And Australia has a good uptake of vaccines. So I think it would probably, if we do get a vaccine that works, you would imagine that it would be quite popular and you wouldn't have too many problems getting people to take it. But as I said, it would be prioritised to like healthcare workers, aged care, and then definitely for older people.
Just on making people take up that vaccine, the Prime Minister has said today that he would like any vaccine to COVID-19 to be as mandatory as possible. How will the government implement such a policy for those people who may not want to take it?
Well, we know that there are always exemptions. There are some people who don't want to have a vaccine for medical grounds or some exemptions on religious grounds. And so there will need to be some facilities there for that. But there are also mechanisms in place to make sure that as many people as possible do get the vaccine. And the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, reminded us today that he was actually the minister who brought in the No Jab, No Pay program, where families couldn't get the family tax benefit if they didn't have their immunisation schedule up to date. And that was actually very successful in increasing the rates of vaccines in Australia. So there are structures in place to make sure people do get it, but there also needs to be those exemptions available for people who can't have it particularly on medical grounds.
Now, the trials underway are aimed at discovering if a potential vaccine will have side effects. Is there a chance side effects will be discovered once a vaccine is administered to the public?
So the idea about the latest trial, the phase 3 trial, is really designed to look at in a big population whether there are side effects. In the trials that have been done so far of the Oxford vaccine, they found about 70% of people developed either a headache or fever, but that was managed by taking some paracetamol. So because the virus causes an inflammatory response in the body, the people having the vaccine had that very mild inflammatory response, but it was easily managed with taking some paracetamol. You would hope we would know about those side effects before it becomes something that the governments roll out, and that's why we need those really big trials to be done.
There is a suggestion today that Australia should consider establishing a vaccine injury compensation scheme. Is there any sense that A, it is under consideration, and B, is such a scheme already in use overseas?
Yeah, look, these schemes are in use overseas in about 25 countries, and what they're designed to do is it's for rare and severe reactions to a vaccine. We haven't had one in Australia, but I guess if we're looking at a vaccine that would be rolled out very, very, very widely, then some academics would like to see a system like this in place. I'm not aware that there are any active discussions for this in Australia, but given that we're sort of hearing more and more about a vaccine, I guess it's something that we need to consider about whether we do need that. But it is just to reiterate, it's for rare and severe side effects, which is obviously something that's not going to affect the majority of people.
I suppose we should keep in the back of our mind that there has been no vaccine to date for any previous coronavirus. If a vaccine candidate is discovered and developed as a vaccine, is there a chance that the development and distribution of it might simply be too slow to target coronavirus as it evolves?
Well, there's a couple of things. You're right. We don't have vaccines. Like, if you think about it, we don't have a vaccine for HIV. What we have is some really good treatments, and that we could end up with coronavirus, that's what we end up with. We end up with a group of targeted treatments that really help you if you do get the virus. There is no you're right to say there's no vaccine for any coronavirus. And what we've found, the vaccine that are being developed around the world, that they're using the Wuhan strain of the virus, and we know it has mutated since then. So we'll need to make sure that any vaccine that's developed is effective on the most current strains of the vaccine. So there's a lot of ifs and buts, and we're still a long way off. But look, there is some reason to hope, but we don't want to get our hopes up too much. And just to reiterate that although a vaccine, yes, would be wonderful, we can still all do stuff right at the moment to stop the spread of this virus, like washing your hands, social distancing, and all the rest of it.
Our medical reporter Sophie Scott bringing us up to date on the latest announcement. And there will be much more reaction and analysis of the government's vaccine deal coming up on Afternoon Briefing with Patricia Karvelas. Among PK's guests, Professor Julie Leask, an advisor to the World Health Organisation on improving the uptake of vaccinations. That is at 4 p.m. Eastern Time here on the ABC News channel.